Great. Derrick Alcoholic, what up, my people? What up, y'all? Y5, Y5, Y5. What's going on? So glad to be here and grateful to be here. Before I get started, I always like to read, I call it the big book disclaimer. It's on page 29 of our big book. Each individual in the personal stories describe in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. This gives a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. So we're on step 4. And my sponsor really drove in the idea, and I drive this into the idea of the guys I take through this process also, that first of all, if you're trying to do this without prayer, you're still operating on self-will. So before he told me I pick up that pen and get to writing, he challenged me to pray. So we're going to kick it off with the prayer right before the work that we're about to jump in, which is the third step prayer, page 63. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thy will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. All right. Then he said 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We launched. We launched right into this into page 64 after we were really clear about the work we were about to get done. So it says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. My ego immediately, if your ego like my ego is smarter than me, actually. At times I will say that. And my ego immediately said, wait a minute, personal inventory. Where have I heard that before? Step 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Well, this didn't say promptly admitted it. So this lets me know that at least the continued to take personal inventory, this is where I'm going to start the continuation process of that personal inventory. So it says, this was step 4. A business that takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged and unsellable goods, to get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner of a business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. Now, look, my sponsor was a good old boy from Texas. I'm talking about when the big book says we're people who normally wouldn't mix. Me and my sponsor, if we met on the streets, we would probably walk by each other as fast as we possibly could. That's how he was. He passed actually last October of 2023. Rest in peace, Brian. And I love that guy because again, night and day. You got good old boy meets boy in the hood at the kitchen table of Alcoholics Anonymous. Night and day. And my sponsor taught, he first of all, a little bit more about him. He loved Jesus. I mean, that guy again. And I came in with little kind of like, I don't know, bro, about how much I came in with like agnostics ideas about his beliefs, right? And he challenged me. It's like, D, lay it aside, baby. Lay it aside and just listen to my love for the power greater than myself. And you find that type of love for the power greater than yourself, right? And I mean, he would, anytime he talked about it, he would cry. I mean, I get emotional thinking about him right now, just how much he would cry because he loved Jesus so much. And and but in this work, he pushed it to the side. He only talked about it when he talked about his experience. He didn't try to push that on me. And he described this situation, because my father was a minister, but so I had a biblical background. And he described this situation like this, and I share this with the guys I work with. He said, dude, it was something about angels, and when angels ran up on people in spiritual text, that their appearance must have been really, really frightening, because they always said, be not afraid. I'm bringing you good news, you know? And when he said that, I immediately saw the relationship between that angelic presence and the truth for me, because I had been running, I had been hiding, I had been ducking, I especially had been drinking to escape from the relentless force of the truth. The truth was always in my face, and I always was afraid to see it. But here it is in this fourth step. It's challenging me to, Derrick, let's face this truth. Let's look at the truth right in your face, Derrick. I know you've been blocking it out with your delusions. I know you've been hiding from it through alcohol. But now, with a sober mind, let's look at the truth together. I got your back, D. I'm not going to leave you out here by yourself with just you and the truth. We'll walk hand in hand towards it. So it says, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. This chapter, how it works, yells convinced, 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 convinced. My sponsor drove into my mind how selfish I was in that third step. And it's not selfish in the sense that I like Doritos. So you might get 3 Doritos out my bag if I like you, right? So it's not that type of selfish. It's the selfishness where I will go slap insane and put you, myself, my neighbor, the people at the grocery stores, the kids at the baseball game, football game, the people on the highway in traffic, the people at the cash register still writing checks. I will go selfish and affect their lives. I can go selfish and affect children's lives for the rest of their lives and not even know I'm doing it. Being convinced that type of selfishness was It manifested in various ways, had defeated me. I'm looking for the common manifestations. Then it goes to resentments. Resentments, the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have not only been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. I did not know my spirit could get sick. Like, again, all the things I have been doing in life, me living life and just making it through, hustle and bustle, trying to make it as a guy in America, I never knew that I was killing my spirit slowly. And I definitely didn't know that resentment was a sniper when it comes to killing my spirit. Then it gives me one of the greatest promises I love in the big book. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. You know, I used to think, and this is just my experience, I used to think that, you know, I was manic depressive. You know, I've never been diagnosed by a psychiatrist or anything like that. But through my own self-diagnosis, alcoholics can tend to be doctors themselves. All of a sudden get this medical degree and we think we know medical things. So through my self-diagnosis, I'm like, I gotta be manic depressive. Like, I gotta be, you know? And I even wanted to go to doctors with my diagnosis so I could get the designer drugs, if I could use that term, mostly to sell them. I didn't really take drugs, but mostly to sell them. But anyway, but this promise told me, like, Derrick, when we start looking at cleaning out this spirit, man, the mind and the body will follow. Because I had been convinced since the beginning of the book, I was abnormal in the mind and abnormal in the body. Now you're telling me in that abnormalness, I could find some sense of normal and abnormal. Okay, let's go. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. And see, I'm gonna tell you this. You see that big warning? And I understand, y'all. So if you like me, I get it. But you see that big warning we just experienced? You know, today I found myself not getting resentful. Not so much because it'll kill me, as it just explained, and all spiritual sickness come from it. But I don't like writing. I don't like to write. Like, that's how God disciplined me with resentments. Like, all right, Derrick, you're going to have to set it down on paper because it says right here, this is how we deal with resentments. Anytime you got something eating your lunch, Derrick, guess what you're going to have to do? Pick you up a pen and a paper and write it out, you know? So it says we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves, why were we angry? That's an inward contemplation, inward prayer. Why were we angry? I was told every time the big book says ask, I go to God. God, why am I angry about this? Bill said, I must turn all things over to the Father of light who presides over us all. Where here I needed the Father of light to shine on my resentments because I, as a real tough looking man, did not want you to think that people could hurt me. So I didn't think I had any resentments, or I wouldn't tell you I had resentments because I'm tough. I'm built forward tough, you know? So it says, in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, and our ambitions, our personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burnt up. On our grudge list, we set opposite name injuries. It was our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which were had been interfered. And so that's what I began to bring into my mind when I had the pen in my hand, paper in front of me. It says we were usually as definite. We were usually as definite as this example. I am resentful at Mr. Brown. The cause, his attention to my wife, told my wife my of my mistress, Mr. Brown may get my office job. It affects my sex relations, my self-esteem, fear, my also again B would affect my sex relations, self-esteem, fear, and C would affect my security, self-esteem, and fear. And I put it A, B, and C because my sponsor showed me that's how we're gonna break it down. We're gonna break it down: A, resentment; resentment B, resentment C. So Miss Jones, resentment A. She's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. Resentment B. She's a gossip. All right. And what does all that affect? Personal relationships, self-esteem, fear, right? There's a fear inside that. My expense account. What does that affect? My self-esteem, bracketed fear, security. My wife, one big A. Misunderstands and nags, likes Brown, wants house put in her name. What does that affect? It affects my pride, my personal relations, my security, bracketed fear. And all those make sense, because in that energy, I'll just use the wife for example. Of course, his pride was hurt because she wants the house. His security was affected because, again, houses are worth money. Houses, you live in a house, you stay. I mean, again, if she gets mad, he's homeless. Boom, out on the street. His personal and sex relations. She likes Mr. Brown. So that means that he in his mind, I can feel this. Mr. Brown is gonna get something he possesses, and he really keeps close, heart and body. So back to the reading. We went through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. Now, I'll pause right there. My sponsor challenged me to go back through my life. Now, this is just the way me and my sponsor did the process. He said, I want you to go back from age 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, on up to my current age, right? And he said, I want you to think about the schools you went to, the neighborhood you were living in, the churches you went to, the people you were growing up around. And I want you to dig deep in your resentments, right? So I could write resentments all day. Let me say that, you know. So these were some of the names I came up with. So my mother, these are the ones I normally share with sponsees also. My mother, there was this kid, after my mom passed, I lived with a family and they had a little brother named Rara. Rara was on my resentment list. My sponsor challenged me to dig deep. He said, Derrick, you could put the dodgeball girl that didn't pick you for the dodgeball team if you want. Or you could pick the ice cream man that drove right past you when you tried to stop him if you want. but I challenge you to dig deep. So I did. Institutions, police. Yes, I put the police. Of course, I put the police on. Of course. Come on, y'all. The police. Then I also added racism on there, right? And see, I kind of, let me tell you this. I prayed. Let me show you how God works in my life. I prayed to his ass, like what to put on here, right? And I really did this resentment because I wanted to go in on this good old boy from Texas. Because in his kitchen, he had a Confederate flag on the wall. So again, it was a resentment within a resentment to see how he was gonna do that one right there. Y'all see how, again, I told you, I'm real alcoholic. Also on this resentment list, and I had to put these people because of the actual resentment I had with them. And it wasn't what you think. There was Hitler, Malcolm X, and the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, the cause, my mama whooping me, had me playing the cello in the hood. What kid in the hood played the cello? This kid. Also, never really showing me love. Rah rah. You know, he would throw shoes at me on Saturday mornings when I'm trying to sleep in. Rah rah would also never let me, anytime I brought a girl back to the house, he never let me and that girl spend quality time together. He was always in our face. Also, we fought over food stamps. Now that again, police, of course, the harassment, the profiling with the police, right? Then we got racism, of course. You know, I believe that racism had the power to prevent me from living the best life I could live, whether it was a neighborhood, whether it was a certain job, whether it was making money, you know, money or whatever. I believe racism had the power to do that. And those three men I mentioned, what I resented about them was they could stand at a podium in front of a bunch of men and compel those men to do and behave and believe exactly what they wanted those men to do. And I wanted that type of power. So it says, to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. In war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moment of triumph was short-lived. And I remember getting into the arguments over these resentments, getting into situations with these resentments, and then going home with the judge, executor, and prosecutor, you know, which is in my head, and saying, dang, Derrick, I can't believe you let them talk to you like that, man. They're gonna think you a coward, bro. Girl. So when I read that, it just hit hard. Cause I know what that is. Being mad at myself because I didn't say it. I didn't stand up for myself. I just let them run over me. I cowered down, you know. It was plain that a life which includes deep resentments led to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander hours that might have been worthwhile. But the alcoholic whose hope is in the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. See, I read that originally, and this was before I took calculus. I read infinitely grave originally. It didn't seem as dangerous. But see, in calculus, I learned between the number 0, if that's a number, Between the placeholder 0 and the number 1, there are infinite numbers in between. For instance, like 0.0000000000001, infinite numbers in between 0 and 1. So infinitely grave means, Derrick, there's infinite numbers of ways this thing could kill you. You're not just looking over your shoulder for one thing, you're looking over your shoulder for infinite arrows coming at you. And squandered the hours, man. If I really had the understanding of my mother, she only lived till I was 14. You know, the relationship that you guys would have provided for me and my mom, uh, it brings tears to my eyes. But okay, so it says, we found it is fatal. From harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of spirit. Insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. We've been warned that so many times. Bill said it on page 14 in his story. For if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Anytime the big book repeats itself, highly important. Here we go. So it says, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Not if we were to go throughout the day, one day at a time. If we were to live. Warning. Warning, warning, warning. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. And I'm sure y'all heard of how words means one thing. And so what I was taught was the brainstorm is that fit of rage. That fit of rage when you just go from 0 to 60. Somebody do something and you just, just like, oh, I'm about to get this person the bird. How dare you cut me off? That was not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholic, these things are poison. We turned back to the list. Now we went back to that list we looked at, right? For it held the key to the future. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me what I just wrote down is my key to my future? That started to interest me. It says, we were prepared to look entirely from a different angle. We began to see that this world and its people really dominated us. Now, as you can see the resentments I had on my list, you see how the world and those people had dominated my life for so long. My mother, my relationship with Rah-Rah, the police, racism, those 3 men, Hitler, Malcolm X, the Grand Dragon of the KKK. It says, in that state, the wrongdoing of others, which is the definition of resentment, fancied or real, had the power to kill. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. How could we escape? We saw resentments must be mastered. But how? I had to take them to the master. I had to take them to the master with the capital M. We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. This was the course. We realized people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, the way they got under my skin, though I did not like the way they talked to me, though I did not like that name they called me because my skin is this color. They, like ourselves, were sick too. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person wrong offended us, we said to ourselves, "This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done." A little bit of the fifth step. My sponsor said, "Derrick, you see that? Again, I told you racism. I'm trying to see how you're going to handle this." He said, "Derrick, you see that ism on the end of racism?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know that ism, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "You got it with your alcohol ism, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know you a sick person?" "Oh, I'm convinced I'm a sick person. I'm convinced I'm a sick person." He said, "So let's call that ism the inner spiritual malady. Whether it's on racism, terrorism, sex, all inner malady. You now have a prayer for it. So when that guy comes up to you and he looks you in your face and he calls you that name, he calls you that word, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. My sponsor also asked me and challenged me, which I challenged the guys I take to the process. What sickness have you witnessed somebody die from? And your heart is so compelled, whether it's cancer, whether it's AIDS, whether it's even COVID. If you've seen somebody die from them and it compels your heart to them, can you imagine that sick person having that illness? Because we know the illness we have is deadly. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. Now, here's the kicker. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God, not Derrick's idea, not my sponsor's idea, but God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Even if that means, Derrick, you might have to get out of that guy's face. Ah, referring to the list again. This is the okie doke. This is this is the sneak. This is, and we call this part the turnaround section of the inventory. This is the one y'all sneaked in on me. Here we go. Referring to the list again, putting out our minds the wrongs others had done. We resolutely, looking for the solution, resolutely looked for our own faults. No, our own wrong. No, our own mistakes. Ah, where were we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though the situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them in black and white, and we admitted our wrongs honestly, and were willing to set these matters straight. Ego popped up again on that word. My ego said, "Wait a minute, Derrick. What does that sound like to you? Don't that sound like the eighth and the ninth step?" Hold on, Derrick. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You just put these resentments down here that you wrote down, and he snuck in the eighth and the ninth step on you, man. Am I gonna have to make amends for all this? Like, come on, bro. Like, am I gonna have to make amends? He said, Derrick, whoa, 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 whoa. When we get there, we'll get there. But for now, let's look at this. Selfish. He told me to ask myself in each resentment, selfish. What did I want? Good or bad? What did I want out of the resentment? Good or bad? For my mom, I wanted my mom to love me as a mama loves her son. I just wanted her to care about me. She made me play the cello and didn't even come to any cello recitals. Self-seeking. Where was I self-seeking? What behaviors, good or bad, did I do to get what I wanted out of it? Well, my mom made me play the cello. I became the first chair in the Junior Symphony Orchestra in Dallas. The Dallas Junior Symphony Orchestra, first chair cello player right here, right? I had to wear tails and everything, a little tuxedo, cummerbund. First time ever wear it like that. You dress it like that, right? Or I would clown in class because I knew this teacher would call my mama when things got too much for her to handle. And I liked pushing her buttons. Those were my self-seeking behavior. Okay. What was I frightened? Meaning, what was I afraid of losing or not getting? I was afraid of losing my position in the family as the only boy, the idea of the position in the family as the only boy in the house, the man of the house, and not getting the true love and respect I felt mothers should give their children. Now, see, all this stuff is not always good or bad or right or wrong. And that's where my sponsor came in. He was like, Derrick, I'm not saying none of this is bad. None of this is good. I'm not judging it. We're just looking at it. And here's the kicker. Where was I dishonest? What lie was I telling myself? What narrative was I telling myself about this resentment? I was lying to myself and telling myself that my mama was Claire Huxtable or the Beeves mom. I never really accepted my mother for who she truly was, for who she was showing me she was, for the woman that I lived in the house with up until age 14. I never accepted that version of her. The version I had in my mind was who I wanted her to be. It broke my heart. That's the genius of this fourth step. That's the miracle, the freedom I got from this fourth step. You know, it says now, wow. Notice the word fear bracketed alongside the difficulties Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, and the employer and the wife. This short word touches about every aspect of our lives. And it was amazing how these words became so true because I was so fearful growing up. But I wouldn't let you know that. I wouldn't tell you that. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence shot through with it. I felt that so deep within. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. I was afraid of men and women my whole life. I was afraid. Give you an example. There was this gentleman's club back in Dallas. It was called Under the Bridge. And just the name of it lets you know what kind of area of Dallas you had to go to get to it, right? So in this gentleman's club, you will find Dallas's most successful drug dealers, the most violent gangs, and some of the most beautiful women in Dallas. And I was terrified to go every single time. I remember one time we went in And my buddies, to show you the abnormal thinking of this alcoholic and to show you the fearfulness of this alcoholic, we went in and my buddy said, man, they didn't pat me down before I came in here. Matt, did they pat you down? Matt was like, nah. Did they pat you down? And I was like, nah. Then Matt said these words, dang, I could have brought my gun in here and they never would have known. And Derrick, the alcoholic's response was, y'all left y'all's in the car? I could not tell them that I was so afraid to go in there that I'm going to sneak my gun into this building. And not just that, I'm going to drink a whole bunch of alcohol to get comfortable around these beautiful women enough to chill out. But y'all know I shot the mark. I overshot the mark every time. And that night we got kicked out of there because I went too wild. But back to the reading. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. Yeah, it did. Because I spent countless hours that I could have been focusing on something else, procrastinating because I sold myself the idea that, oh, you work better when you're fearful. Oh, you seem to pay your bills better when you wait till the last minute to pay your bills. If you wait long enough, that beautiful girl will probably come over here and talk to you, dude. You don't have to go over there and do anything. And I end up hating and resenting myself because I was so afraid. It says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them down on paper, even though we had no resentments connection with them. We asked ourselves, why did we have them? Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it got worse. One of my first higher powers in drinking, other than alcohol, was a high-powered rifle called an AK-47. It made me cocky. I would wait for people to try me. And it ended up in that cockiness, in the blackout, in a mixture of the two. Bill described it great. I forged a weapon that left me homeless, left me unemployable, and divorced. I picked up a violent misdemeanor charge that I waited 2 months to get lowered down to that misdemeanor charge because they tried to get me for attempted murder. When it made me cocky, it was worse. These words hit so hard. It says, perhaps perhaps there's a better way. We think so. For we now, on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite, there's that word again, infinite God, rather than our finite selves. We're in this world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as he thinks he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. I wondered how y'all would be so happy and just still coming to meetings and be so strong when y'all would tell me y'all parents would die, y'all lost y'all children, y'all were going through a serious illness like cancer. How are y'all going through that and not drinking? By trusting and relying upon an infinite God. Not just the God of reason. That's limiting him to reason. Not just the God of the universe. Nah, that's just limiting him to this universe. What if the cure that I need is way outside the Milky Way galaxy? And I need God to reach over there and bring it over here to me. I need an infinite God. So it says, we never apologize to anyone for depending on our creator. We laugh at those who think spirituality is a way of weakness. Paradoxically, it's a way of strength. The verdict of ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fears, direct our attention to what he would have us be. That's some trust. Remove my fear, and what would you have me be? That's some serious trust in this power and reliance on him. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. You know, I had a fear of chipmunks. They look like grizzly bears when they were running around on the ground, you know. But I would still myself, be still, and know that this infinite power out there has all control of all things. Now about sex. And real quick, my resentment list was a cheat sheet for the fear and the sex inventory. I say it was a cheat sheet because everywhere I had fear bracketed, I moved that over to the fear list. Everywhere I had personal relationships or sex relationships, I moved that over to the sex inventory, right? And to be honest, the work that I did in the sex inventory sound more sexual than the actual work. I mean, just the name of it, actually. The name sex inventory sounds more sexual than the actual work that I did in the sex inventory. But I found out so much about myself. Many of us needed an overhauling there. When we got to this section, my sponsor said, look, Derrick, do you know what overhauling is? And I was like, kinda. He said, if I'm about to overhaul that car out there, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take the motor out. If I take the motor out, what does that mean? I was like, that means that you can't crank the car up. He said, right, the car is stuck there and it stops. So I challenge you, while you're doing this sex inventory, to stop all the behaviors of all this sexual energy you giving out. Just stop it right now and get through this sex inventory. You can pick it back up afterward, but we need a clear mind, a sober mind, sexually. Here we go. He said, but above all, we tried to be sensible on the questions. It is so easy to get way off track. Here we find human emotions running to extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set cries for that sex is the lust of lower nature based on necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices that cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of our troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we don't have enough of it or it isn't the right kind. They see the significance everywhere. I was that person. Sex was everywhere. It's on TV, it's on billboards. We live in America where sex sells. Some of the quietest meetings I have been in have been about three-letter words: God and sex. And you would think alcoholics who have been recovered would yell about those two things. You know, every person on this meeting today, in some way, you know, there are science has a brilliant way of doing it, but we're got here through some form of sexual activity. Every person on here. And if you got kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it says one school will have no flavor for his fare. The other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. And I always tell the guys I'm working with, look, bro, I'm not here to judge nothing that we're writing about. It is not my responsibility as the guy taking you through this process to judge you for anything we talk about right here. All we're going to do is just look at it, take a different look at it. It says, we don't want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? Here we go. We reviewed our own conduct over the past years. Where had we been? This is what we're looking for. Selfish. Remember, what did we want, good or bad? Dishonest. What lie we were telling ourselves? What narrative were we telling ourselves? Inconsiderate. Inconsiderate. Where were we so selfish that we didn't even consider what the other person was thinking about? It says, whom did we hurt? Especially whom did we hurt? Did we justifiably rouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got all this down on paper. All right, now, if you bear with me, we're going to go through this real fast. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound idea for our future sex life. We subject each relations to the text. Was it selfish or not? Period. Question mark. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Again, we're praying. If you're not doing this with prayer, you're still trying to muscle through this on self-will. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised in lows. Growing up in the Southern Baptist Church, we were always taught a very, very degradative, dark, evil idea about sex. You ain't supposed to be having sex. You're supposed to be married. You ain't supposed to fornicate and just go to hell. So this energy that I had towards women, I suppressed. And I felt guilty about it. I felt guilty for looking at these beautiful creatures God created in a way that I was attracted to. That shame, that guilt, but fear was connected to fear and connected to resentments. The genius in this 4th step, I'm telling you, this stuff is genius. This stuff is genius. It says, whatever our ideas turn out to be, we must be willing to grow toward them. We must be willing to make amends where we had done harm. Ow, here we go again. The ego. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's talking about the 8th and 9th step. Why are you talking about? provided that we do not bring some still more harm in doing so. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. Second chance of meditation right here. In meditation, prayer and meditation, I call it contemplation. We ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone. Okay, I need to speed it up. God alone will judge our sex conduct, counsel with the person is desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize some people are fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. You know, that genius in that 4th step allowed me to look at my life and do an inventory on my life and do an inventory on my life to see where I had really been that selfish in that 3rd step that he talked about. So selfishness, self-centered, we think is the root of all our troubles. Well, after writing that inventory, I see why they said we think. Because I had it all throughout all the inventory. And the clear freedom I got from that, the freedom I got from sitting in front of God, in front of ourselves, and another human being was astronomical, but still nothing compared to that 8th and that 9th step that my ego was afraid of at this point in the process. So again, if you are here writing, keep on writing. If you're prepared to do that fifth step, where I consider the fifth step of prayer, because my sponsor told me again, and I tell the guys I work with, anytime you talk to God, it's a prayer. You're about to admit to God, to yourself, and to another human being the exact nature of these wrongs. Keep on. And if you're thinking about doing this, we beg you to join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and surely we will meet some of you as we trudge this road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Thank you, Steve.